Number 5. Soviet submarine K-19. The K-19 was a nuclear-powered sub which carried nuclear missiles. This sub was hastily built in response to rising tensions with the USA. This meant that the reactor wasn't exactly built to spec. You see, the submarine had a notorious history. 10 workers had died during various accidents and fires when the submarine was being constructed. On July 4th, 1961, the sub's reactor lost all coolant. Fearing that the reactor would melt down, the captain ordered the sailors to jerry-rig a coolant system, which caused the radioactive coolant to be exposed to the breathable air. Within 2 years, 22 crew members had died from radiation poisoning or cancer. Lieutenant Boris Korchalov received a dose of 5,400 rem, which is the highest dose of radiation that anyone has ever received. Korchalov and most of the repair technicians died only a few days later, but new advances in bone marrow transplants and blood transfusions allowed some of the engineers to actually survive. The submarine continued to operate until 1990, despite being nicknamed Hiroshima as a result. Number 4. Tokai Murrah nuclear accident. In the late 90s, 3 workers in Japan were adding more nuclear fuel to a reactor. In order to prepare the fuel, Masato Shinohara and Hisashi Aiuchi were pouring nitrate into the reactor with a steel bucket. This was a very bad idea, since the right mix of nitrate and uranium can cause the fuel to go critical. After the 7th bucket, a large blue flash occurred. Immediately afterward, both workers began to experience pain, nausea, and vomiting. The radiation was so bad that the DNA in Aiuchi was completely destroyed. It was estimated that the amount of radiation Aiuchi absorbed was the equivalent to the epicenter of the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Aiuchi was kept alive for 83 days against his will, so that doctors could study the effects of radiation. Both Shimohara and Aiuchi eventually died several months later. Number 3. SL1 Nuclear Meltdown. The SL1 was a small prototype reactor located in rural Idaho. The US Army wanted to provide power for small bases in places like Antarctica and Greenland. However, during maintenance, John Burns pulled out the reactor rod too quickly, which caused an explosive steam event known as a water hammer. The fuel rod shot up and impaled Specialist Richard Legg in the roof. Burns was knocked out unconscious, and since the reactor had gone critical, it was too late. All 3 men would later die from their injuries. The event was so bad that Legg's body couldn't be removed from the ceiling for 5 days. The bodies of the 3 men were so radioactive that they were placed in lead coffins, which were buried under 10 feet of concrete, which was also sealed in a metal container. Some theories suspect that Burns was attempting a murder-suicide, since the rod couldn't be accidentally withdrawn as he did, especially given the immense amount of training he had gone through. His wife had divorced him 2 hours before this incident, and Burns had gotten into a fistfight with Legg at a recent party. However, since all men died, we may never know the real reason why Burns yanked out the fuel rod. Number 2. Demon Core. The Demon Core is the nickname for a large hemisphere of plutonium gallium, which went critical when the 2 spheres touch. Now, by moving the 2 spheres closer together, scientists could see just how close they could get to criticality and find the maximum amount of neutrons emitted. This was typically done with a set of screwdrivers, which was incredibly dangerous. Should one of the screwdrivers slip, the entire semisphere would glow blue, and anyone close to it would die in a few days' time. Enrico Fermi once famously told these scientists that they'd be dead within a year if they continued this method. Ultimately, he was right. This happened on 2 separate occasions in 1945 and 1946, with almost everyone in that room dying of cancer either a couple years later or much longer down the road. Only a few people present in that room were able to live to old age. Slotlin, who hit the demon ball off with his hand, died 9 days later due to a huge dose of radiation. Number 1. Kyshtym disaster. In the 1950s, the USSR didn't have the best approach with storing nuclear waste. For a while, they used a lake for nuclear storage, which caused the lake to become the most toxic place on Earth. Obviously, this is a bad idea, so they installed some nuclear waste facilities instead. But they didn't factor in overheating, which caused one of these containers to explode, which this sent a huge cloud of radioactive liquid into the air. Now, due to censorship in the Soviet Union, it took at least a week before some villages were evacuated. Other villages ended up waiting more than 600 days before they were evacuated as well. Strange illnesses began to occur, with people dying for seemingly unknown reasons. Rumors and reports spread of a new type of flesh-eating disease, which was the only explanation as to why people's skin was falling off. Current estimates show that anywhere between 1,000 to 8,000 villagers died as a result. The fallout region was, and is still, close to the public. Today, the region has an incredibly high amount of radioactive material still in the soil. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you later.